Alright everybody, it's time to start working with an actual database that has actual data in it. Woohoo! So the Cape Cod database is on Blackboard. You can download it for this lesson. If you want to go ahead and pause so you can grab the file, that's fine. If you already have it, good for you. We're going to be looking at page 39, and I've already got the Cape Cod database downloaded, so I'm going to double click it to open it in Access. And if you get this warning, you can just say enable content or ignore it. It doesn't really matter for what we need to do here. So here are the tables that we've been looking at, along with a few new ones that we weren't expecting. So the inventory shows us items, how many they have, what warehouse they're in, etc. So let's work with the data that we know. And I'm going to snap this over here and pull up what we were looking at earlier. This is from lesson 2, I believe. So let's get some practice on this. We're going to create a query and actually pull some data. Let's have a look at it first. The first thing that you need to do before you begin working in any query is to actually look at the data so that you can see what you're working with. And it'll also help to let you know whether there's something wrong with your query too. So the very first thing that you do before you even begin looking at a query is to understand the data. Because if you don't understand the data, it's very important to pull information out of it. So let's begin by looking at creating a query. So query design, cancel, right click, SQL view. And here we are. So let's actually look at this query here. And I'm just going to copy it, but you can transcribe it if you want. Now you may notice this semicolon thing. Access prefers that you close your SQL queries with a semicolon to let Access know that it's done. However, it doesn't really matter, and it'll run the query either way. So I put it in because I'm a perfectionist sometimes, and that's how I prefer. I know that's how Access wants it, so I put it there, but it doesn't really matter. So I'll leave it out just to show you. So if I run this, I'm going to get the order numbers and store numbers from retail order. Ta-da! Now I know it looks rather simplistic and whoop-de-doo so what kind of thing, but this is actually a very powerful beginning to extracting information out of a database. So I can see here, just by looking at the data, that store 10 has had 2 orders and store 20 has had 1. That's what's in my database. This store zip and order month, it doesn't really matter because all I've asked for in my query is order number and store number. And if you want, you can right click the tab and go back to the SQL view, modify it, and so on. So you notice when I run the query, I've selected order number and store number, and that's what it gives me. But if I reverse the listing and I run it, it reverses the results. The data doesn't really matter. It just wanted to demonstrate to you that the data comes to you in the order in which you list it. So there's a SQL query on page 39, the one in the middle of the page, that we're going to actually work with now. So it lists department and buyer from SKU data. So let's have a look at that. And we've got water sports, camping and climbing, and a few buyers. So let's see what we get. Create, SQL design, close. Again, if I'm going a little too fast for you, feel free to pause, go back. This is a video. You've got complete control over it, so feel free and go back and go over it as many times as you please. Right click and do SQL view. And I want the department and buyer from SKU data. So select tells me what fields I want. Department and buyer. And from is what table it comes from. Comes from SKU data. Now there is one other thing that some astute observers may notice. is that the table is in all caps, but what I've listed here is not. And truthfully, in most environments, SQL is not case sensitive. You could have this in all lowercase if you wanted to, and it would still execute. But the capitalization matters because it makes the SQL easier to read. That's why select and from is almost always in all caps, so that they're easier to pick out from the sentence. You could likewise have it in a single line here and it does the same thing. The spacing just makes it a little easier to read. So select buyer and department, or excuse me, department and buyer from SKU data. I run it. That's what I get. So that's a demonstration of how to pull data, run a simple select off of a database. And if you want, you can continue practicing with this using the queries on page 39 and 40.